some of the red flags that you look out for. Could you mention some of the traits that a parent should look out for? And at the same time, are some of these behaviors or characteristics reversible? And also, can they be stopped completely, maybe when the mother is pregnant? Is there something that they should be doing to avoid such an experience?
Yes, so we try to educate as many mothers as we can come across. That's why I'm on this platform, which is to try and educate as many, not just mothers, parents, really, as we can reach. Because some of these situations occur because of genetic issues. So it's important to know your family background so that you know if there is such a history of, children who are born and end up being delayed, so that you can get some genetic counseling even before you conceive a baby. Once conception has happened, which means a woman is pregnant, we encourage good nutrition for the mother, adequate rest, adequate hydration, adequate exercise during pregnancy, just to make sure the mother really is healthy. And we encourage the mother to go for their ultrasounds on time and to go for their clinics where they'll get supplements such as folic acid, which are very important for the development of the child.
Hello and welcome to the Millionaire Mind. My name is Turi Faye. Now, the focus of this show is to highlight women across the board, especially when it comes to people who are really making moves in the business industry. And not just that, women who are doing very impactful things in society today. And joining us, we have Dr. Lilian Kerubo, who will be sharing her story with us. And it's quite impactful. Thank you so much for making time to come and see us.
You're welcome.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Okay.
How are you?
I'm good.
Yes.
So please introduce yourself and tell us what you do. Don't leave anything out.
Okay, I am Dr. Lilian Kerubo, a pediatrician by profession, a mother, a citizen of this great nation, and an entrepreneur. So I'm in the business of childcare, and particularly the early child development and the care of children who are developing atypically. And in that space, I treat common illnesses such as colds, coughs, malaria, but also take care of the development of the child, whether they are achieving the skills that they ought to have achieved by a certain age, whether they are thriving in school,
the milestones.
Socially, yes, milestones. So I make sure that they are not falling behind, and for those who are falling behind, I recommend the care that they need to get.
Okay.
Yes.
So how exactly are you able to figure out that, this child is not reaching the milestones that they're supposed to be reaching at a certain age? Because some children, do it later on in life. It's not like a one set course for every child, how they develop. So how are you able to very early pinpoint that, there's an issue here and maybe it's time for us to start correcting what's happening?
Right. So from the outset, we pick children who are at risk of not reaching their milestones at the time that they ought. So by this, we will determine what we call red flags. And this could be things like maybe this child was born premature, or the mother had issues during pregnancy like high blood pressure, or the delivery process was difficult. Maybe they took some time before they had their first breath. So those are children who will be followed up in a special clinic, and we have guidelines or timetables where we expect a certain skill to be achieved by. It's not a set time, but we allow for a delay of 3 to 6 months depending on the skill. So for example, a child is supposed to have sat independently by 6 months, but we give children a leeway of up to 8 months. And at 8 months, if they have not achieved the skill, then this is a child who is delayed and will require further assistance. So it's really to know children who are at risk and then to monitor them and check their developmental milestones per a certain timetable that have been developed internationally that we refer to.
And I think before we go further into this conversation, it's important that we get a clear definition of some of the terms we're using. For example, atypical. What exactly does that mean?
Right, so atypical basically means it's not the usual thing that we see. So you'll find 80 to 90% of the children, for example, will have sat independently by 6 months. So anybody who does not follow that timetable will be classified as a child who is developing unusually. We are trying to avoid use of terms like abnormal
Yes.
or weird. So that's why we are saying atypical, which means it's just not the usual way, but it doesn't mean it's bad or it's they're deformed. It just means it's not the usual pattern that we see.
Okay. And what would you say inspired you to take this, you know, a career? Because is it the finances, or is there a passion and a story behind behind why you chose to take this route?
So I think as a child, this is something that I guess, in hindsight, I guess influenced me, but at the time it was happening, I obviously did not understand what was happening. As a child, when I was in primary school, I was in a government primary school. I was, and I can say I was a bright student. So in government schools, as you know, they are very overpopulated, overcrowded with students, and obviously the teacher, it's one teacher per class.
Overwhelmed.
She's overwhelmed. She has no time to take care of every child's needs at the level that they require. So what they would do is they would pair a child who is struggling with a child who is not so struggling. So as a child, when I was in standard 2, standard 3, I was paired with a girl who had Down syndrome, and so it was my job to like help her understand what is happening in class. So I didn't give it much thought, so went through school till later on when I qualified as a doctor and even became a pediatrician, is when now you are forced to ask yourself where exactly you would like to, you know, spend a lot of your time and your effort in, because you can't, it's not everything that appeals to you, so you have to find what it is that appeals to you. So when I was making that decision, I had to reflect on what area of childcare do I feel most passionate about, and what area of childcare is underserviced in this country. And so it after a period of soul searching, it came to my mind and my heart that it needs to be the area of childcare that is concerned with the development of a child, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, social, or in any realm that a child needs to develop in.
And would you say that your experience, especially growing up, yes, it was a subconscious decision that you made, or that was made for you, but would you say that kind of gave you an advantage in this field you're in, or it just gave you, maybe this is what I'm meant to be doing all along?
Yeah, it wasn't very obvious, I can say, when I was because this is a decision I made about 4 years ago, so it wasn't very obvious. It took a while to know what it is I'm interested in, because during training I was obviously, as all doctors are, interested in surgery, cutting people up, especially the brain, because we all read that book by Ben Carson of Gifted Hands. So going into medical school, I was imagining that I would be a surgeon. So it only took, it took a lot of, I would say, trial and error to find what area I'm passionate in. So the first clarity was to know that I was interested in children. So after finishing my what we call internship, I was clear that I want to work with children, but I didn't know which area of pediatrics I was interested in. So I had again to go back to work and just, trial and error, figuring it out, weighing the merits and demerits of every area of speciality. And after about 3 or 4 years of being in general pediatric care is when I literally sat down for a good number of months and basically went through all areas of pediatrics that are available to see which one appeals to me the most. And that's when I came up with this area.
Okay. Right. And in our country, it's not really the go-to profession for most people. Do you feel like you're understaffed? And while we're still on the same topic, do you feel like you have enough reach for parents and children who have this developmental issues that have not come on board? Because personally, I have come across somebody, and after assessing our children during playgroup, I'm like, in the kindest way possible, have you had this child, taken in for an assessment? Maybe there's something, and there's just a certain level of denial when it comes to parents. So who are you able to reach? Is it only the people who come to you, or is there an initiative to, you know, convince people that maybe it's okay to have your child come in for an assessment?
Yeah, so you're right. This is not an area where people flock to, so we are definitely understaffed. In Kenya, we only have 3 developmental pediatricians, and they are spread mostly towards the, obviously Nairobi has 2, and then the other one is in Kiambu County, I believe. So definitely we are understaffed. I do not have the reach that you know, would be good to have. So how we get our clients is mostly through referrals. So just like you mentioned, you saw a child who you feel requires an assessment. That's how we would end up getting a client. Perhaps they would have been seen by a teacher. A teacher would have, you know, raised a red flag and say, this child is not following me when I'm teaching. Or it's a parent who is very concerned, who would say, my child perhaps is 2 years, they have not taken their first steps, or they have not said their first word. Then they would be referred to, in Kenya, mostly they will be referred to a pediatrician due to the small number of developmental pediatricians that we have. We are trying to increase that number by going for the required education process that we need to go through to be certified as a developmental pediatrician. And so that's how we would get most of the clients. They are not, they don't come willingly because of course of the stigma that is involved with such kinds of situations. So you'd find we get a lot of late referrals. So you'd find a child perhaps reached the age of going to school, which is age 4 in this country, and then it's the teacher who will tell the parent, I think your child deserves an assessment. So some of the parents would come perhaps not even knowing that their child had an issue, or perhaps they were denying that the child had an issue until it was too late. So we get a lot of late referrals, so which means the outcome or the way their development will go from that point is already affected by the fact that they came in a little too late. And once we have made the diagnosis, the services that these children require also are few in this country and are expensive. So you'll find that if a child comes from a family that is not very economically stable, they may still not end up getting the care that they deserve to get.
Yeah. Right. Earlier on in our conversation, you had mentioned some of the red flags that you look out for. Could you mention some of the traits that a parent should look out for? And at the same time, are some of these behaviors or characteristics reversible? And also, can they be stopped completely? Maybe when the mother is pregnant, is there something that they should be doing to avoid such an experience?
Yes, so we try to educate as many mothers as we can come across. That's why I'm on this platform, which is to try and educate as many, not just mothers, parents, really, as we can reach. Because some of these situations occur because of genetic issues. So it's important to know your family background so that you know if there is such a history of, you know, children who are born and end up being delayed, so that you can get some genetic counseling even before you conceive a baby. Once conception has happened, which means a woman is pregnant, we encourage good nutrition for the mother, adequate rest, adequate hydration, adequate exercise during pregnancy, just to make sure the mother really is healthy. And we encourage the mother to go for their ultrasounds on time and to go for their clinics where they'll get supplements such as folic acid, which are very important for the development of the child. We also encourage the birth of the baby to be in a hospital or a skilled environment where if a baby, for example, doesn't take their first breath on time, they will be given oxygen, because if this is the delivery is at home, it will take time before that baby accesses oxygen in case they need oxygen. If a baby has any challenge that can be picked up at birth, it will be addressed at that time. Then once the child has been born and probably has gone home, then now the initiative is on the mother or the parents of the child to know when certain skills are supposed to have been achieved by. So for example, you know, the basics, like a child should have held their head upright at least by age 3 months. A child should have sat on their own by 6 months. A child should have taken their first step by between 1 year and 1.5 years. A child should have said their first word by 1 year. A child should be able to hold an object in their hand at least by 6 months. And a child should have should be able to manipulate small objects like a fork or a spoon or a crayon by 1.5 years. So those big, you know, chunks of development, at least we encourage mothers to know about them. Some of them are printed in the Kenyan book that mothers are given when they go for clinic, even to a government hospital, there is a page 36, that has pictures of the steps that a child should go through in their development. So in case a mother is not able to remember, they can just quickly refer to that book and it will guide them. Then we also try to educate teachers or basically anybody who is involved in childcare to also be able to pick out a child who may be trailing behind in their development, so that we can get early referrals and so that we can institute the care at an appropriate time.
Awesome. This is so informative, and it's unfortunate that not most people have access to this kind of information, because you have mentioned that for some parents, they bring their child at a very later on date when you could have started, you know, corrective therapy very earlier on.
Yes.
Okay, so now as a mother, because you mentioned you are a mother, how has that experience been? Have you have you had moments of paranoia just because of your profession, and you're like, is this happening, or am I reading too much into it? Or even my relatives' children, you look at them like, that's suspicious. How has that experience been?
So it has made me more aware. So for example, my firstborn had not spoken, I think by 11 months, had not spoken, was quite a shy child. But I knew that I had like a few months before I can be like, oh, this is a problem. So everybody else around me had panicked and was like, oh, how come? And especially because some children had spoken that were born around the same time that she was born. So there was pressure, like, when is your child going to speak? But because I had this knowledge, I knew that I had time, that it was not yet, she had not yet crossed the red line where I would say there has been a delay. However, I have been able to pick out situations within my wider family where I've noticed that some children are struggling, and I've been able to give the right advice to the parents and to my relatives on what to do to assist these children. What would you say are some of the influences you've had throughout your career that have really shaped how you work and how you assess children? So the influences have been, you know, from my small circle. I've been interacted with some of my friends or relatives who've had children who are developing atypically, and so I have, because these are, we can say, relatives or, you know, people that I know very intimately. The influence on me has been, how can I make the care for these children less you know, less difficult, because in terms of can I bring it closer, can I make it cheaper, can I make it more convenient for the parents and the carers of these children to access the care that they need, and can I create more awareness of these situations. So that has been the influence on me, to the extent that I started a podcast that educates parents, teachers and any caregiver of these children on the developmental stages that a child goes through, and what we can do even at the home level, in case you can't access a doctor, if you can't access a therapist, if you can't access a physiotherapist, what can you do at home that can assist these children to develop.
Awesome. It's a very impactful journey that you have been on, and congratulations to you. But at the same time, what would you say are some of the challenges that you've encountered so far?
It's challenging because the access, as I mentioned, of these children and these parents to people who are, even if you're not yet certified, but at least you have some knowledge on developmental stages, or, you know, how to help such children, the access is very difficult. I would love to access all children, even those who are not atypically developing, to, you know, just educate and just to check. So it's very difficult because we are very few, those of us who are on this side of, you know, being aware of what constitutes the development of a child and what constitutes the care that they need. So those are some of the challenges. It's not a widely recognized field, so many times people would ask you, oh, what is the development of a child? What is it exactly? So even at a policy level, we are trying with my colleagues to, you know, influence at a policy level, at the national government level, that perhaps we can even do an assessment of all children before school entry, or, you know, at certain points in their lives. Perhaps at 6 months we can have a check, at 1 year we can have a check, at 1.5, you know, at key points of their lives where we can make a big impact.
Yeah.
Those are things that need to happen at a national level, that perhaps we can have a developmental assessment of all children at 1 year, so that we get those who are trailing behind and we support them.
Yeah.
It's also a very expensive care for the child. You'll find a child who is delaying requires physiotherapy, requires occupational therapy, requires speech therapy, requires play therapy, requires behavioral modification strategies for the parents. So it's a very expensive journey. You'll find a child requires, if they need to go see a therapist, they are paying between 1,000 to 3,000 for a session that lasts an hour. Very few parents are able to afford that. It's not covered. Most insurances will not cover such therapies. So it's a very expensive journey. And even for the caregivers, it's very expensive, because sometimes the child is not able to come to you. Maybe they're not able to walk. So it often means sometimes that I go to them. It's expensive. The fuel is high. Some areas are difficult to reach because of the terrain. So it's a very expensive procedure, journey. It's also very discouraging for the caregivers, because there's a lot of stigma surrounding these children, and there is often not a cure, unfortunately, for some of these situations. Most parents would love to hear that we can cure whatever it is that the child has, and often we are not able to cure. We are able to assist, but we are not able to cure it. And so it's a very discouraging journey for the health caregiver, and also for the parent to be on a long time journey that often has very small results. So it's very, very discouraging. It's not surprising that most parents will not take up the therapies that they are advised to take up, or even if they take it up, it's only for a few months and then they drop off. So it's a very challenging journey.
That is so unfortunate. So tell us about your podcast. How exactly did that start, and how is it going so far?
So this was my COVID baby. Remember during COVID, when everybody was getting pregnant, it was either you're getting pregnant or you're starting a business or a venture. So this was born in COVID when we were home most of the time. For healthcare givers, we were not home. However, we were spending a lot of time at home, and so I had recently just gotten into the field of childhood development and gotten the interest and the passion. When you get an interest the first time, you just want to tell everybody that this is what I'm passionate about. So I was literally just struggling, how do I get this information to everybody, because I realized that very few people have this information. So how do I get it out there? And that's when I was listening to a writer. She's called Lavia Jai Jones. She's an author who lives in the US, but she's from Nigeria. And she had a podcast at the time. It was called A Professional Troublemaker. So I was listening to her, and she was saying, literally, you do not need anything to start a podcast. If you have a phone, that's all you need to start a podcast. So I was like, okay, fine, let me try. And so at that time, I started with a small app, Anchor, which was really very easy to use. You just log in and just talk on your phone. And that's how I started. With time, I went on to a different platform. So then I started to learn how to market the podcast. I'm still not very famous, but at least I have some material on the podcast. It's called Difaba Podcast, which can be streamed on Spotify and some other providers such as AfriPods. And so mothers, teachers, caregivers, literally anyone can just go and listen. I've done a number of topics on it that happen to even children who are so quote unquote normal, like parents who are struggling with should I beat my child or should I talk to my child? I have topics on that. Parents who may have a child who is not sleeping through the night, I have topics on that. Parents who are wondering, is it too late if my child has not said their first word at 1 year? So stuff like that is on the podcast, and they can listen and just get a few tips.
Okay, go subscribe to Dr. Lillian's podcast, guys. Your field is quite challenging, but you are going there head first and doing God's work. What would you say are some of the achievements you've had throughout the years?
So some of the achievements I've had is by meeting these parents and these children who are unique in their own way. obviously because of confidentiality, you can't really like say what you have encountered. However, it's very rewarding to see a child who has overcome, even if it's a small challenge that they had, but because of what you've done or what what you've the measures you've put in, the mother comes back and says, my child used to do this, but now they don't do it anymore. I would say that is the biggest reward. The other benefits or the other rewards that I've had in this journey is by meeting very important people in this journey. I've had the opportunity to meet some of the developmental pediatricians in this country who are really big, not just in this country, but also beyond Africa. So it's been really rewarding to meet them. I've met developmental pediatricians from as far as United States, and I recently had an opportunity to advance my career by going through some educational programs. We had some educational program from some pediatricians in the US, developmental pediatricians, and we were certified as ECD champions, which are early child development champions, and I may have an opportunity to even further that and get more education on that. So those are some of the rewards that have come my way in this journey.
Awesome. Right. Now, how do you deal with self-diagnosis? This has been a thing, especially with how the internet works. There's so much information out there. It is very easy for you to pick and choose and say, you know what, this sounds a bit as if, what I'm experiencing or what my child is experiencing. And at the forefront of that, we have seen TikTok therapists. Right. We have seen people diagnose themselves with conditions and say, you know what, I did that because I have ADHD. Yeah. So how is that affecting your industry, and how are you dealing with all of that?
So again, because of the stigma, especially in children, it's very rare for a parent to say, I think my child has autism. It's most likely a neighbor who will say, I think your child has autism, but the parent will most likely say, no,
he's just
until
like
it's too late. So for kids, we rarely get a mother who has self-diagnosed, because no parent wants to have a child, for example, with autism or ADHD. However, we do encourage research, good research, credible research. If you are concerned about your child, yes, you can look it up, but we usually tell parents, don't take the internet's word for it. You can notice that your child has issues and you can look it up, because it's very hard to tell a parent don't research or don't Google it. You can Google it, but once you have seen something that you feel is amiss, we highly encourage that you talk to somebody else about what you've seen or what you think about before you label your child, because really these are things that carry on for a long period of time. So we don't encourage self-diagnosis, especially for children. We do not, even those self-test things that people do on the internet, we highly discourage it for children. Yes, you can look it up, you can, compare with other people on the internet, but we still say your child needs to be seen by somebody. It doesn't have to be a developmental pediatrician, because there are few anyway, but it needs to be a healthcare worker. It can be a general pediatrician, it can be even a general doctor, it can be a therapist, but have your child at least seen by one other person before you accept an internet diagnosis.
Yeah. And, apart from working with, the children, a huge part of what you do requires you working hand in hand with the parent. How are you able to forge a relationship of trust? Because some of them are, as you said before, in denial about what's going on. Some of them think, you just want money. You're trying to get my money out of my very normal, a bit weird child. How do you bridge that gap between you and the parent?
It's a very difficult, place. So more often than not, by the time a parent is coming to me or a child is coming to me, it's usually because they're concerned about something. So that's the starting point, to ask this carer or this parent, what is your main concern about this child, without going into diagnosis and whatever the name would like to call it. We try to focus on the challenge this child is having. And most parents will agree that, my child is having this challenge, I would like to get them better, without caring on what the name you would call it. No parent wants to have a child, for example, who is struggling to speak or express themselves. No parent wants to have a child who is struggling in school. we all want children with A's and you know, pilots and lawyers and whatever. So if that becomes the focus of our conversation, that we are identifying a need that your child has and we are trying to improve that need, that, you know, creates a point of, you know, common ground where at least we can agree on that this is a child who is struggling and we want to get them better.
Yes.
Now, how that comes about requires a lot of, you know, conversations, a lot of time, a lot of, you know, question and answer. Are you open to this? Are you open to that? Are you, can you afford this? Can you afford that? Can you access this? Can you access that? And trying to find an area where you know, we are meeting at a point where I'm offering something that you are willing to take. Yeah, so that's how I try to bridge, you know, that gap of, you know, mistrust, and there is a lot of mistrust because majority of these parents have been to doctors, they have been to therapists, they have been to pastors, they even have been to traditional healers. So by the time they're getting to me, more often than not, I'm like number 4 or number 5 in their journey. It's not usual that I'm the first one to meet them. So by the time they're getting to me, it's a lot of, you know, healing that needs to take place for not just the child but also the parent. And sometimes it doesn't happen easily, and it doesn't happen on the first visit. So I have to be prepared to walk a journey with this carer and this parent. Yeah.
This is such a broad topic. We could never, you know, butcher it in all of 30 minutes. We hope to have you back for a more detailed conversation. But as we are coming to the end of our show, do you have a parting shot?
I would like to say that all children are unique and all children are special, and all children have something that they can do. No matter what their journey is, no matter what their challenge is, let's not give up on these children. Let's help them in the way that we can so that they can achieve their purpose on this earth, because I believe every person has a purpose, and with the right assistance, with the right support, we can help them to achieve their purpose.
Thank you so much, Dr. Linda. I feel very taught, very educated by all of this. If you want to ask a question, the number is 0770729366. But apart from that, I will see you next week. Goodbye.